On the 3rd of September 1939, Prime Minister Robert Menzies made the announcement that Australians had grimly anticipated. Australia had joined Great Britain in declaring war on Germany. The losses of the Great War were still fresh, as Australian soldiers again battled enemy forces overseas. But for those on the home front, the war was initially a remote concept. This all changed December 1941, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and their forces advanced through Southeast Asia. With the fall of Singapore, the war entered the Pacific arena, putting the Australian mainland under threat of invasion. The war was no longer over there, but on Australia's doorstep. Melbourne, with its deepwater port and nationally significant munitions and airport construction factories, was feared to be a target for enemy air attacks. In December 1941, a brownout was enforced, dimming the lights of Melbourne and its suburbs. Life on the home front was altered in both dramatic and benign ways. Shop owners and civilians were instructed to cover their windows at dusk, and shops were forced to close at 6 p.m. The library was no exception, and in addition to the early closing, the windows of the dome reading room were covered, with one regular visitor complaining, "The large reading room is now, in the language of Milton, a dungeon horrible on all sides round." Traffic accidents multiplied, and public transport delays were frequent. Dimmed lighting in trams caused consternation for passengers wanting to read the newspaper on their daily commute. Victorian Railways removed the names of all stations in case of invasion, and passengers had to count stations to make sure they got off at the right stop. The Argus described an unusually quiet lead-up to Christmas in the city, giving the first real presentiments to war. Streets, usually crowded with Friday night shoppers, showed no neon signs, no brilliant illumination of Christmas goods. Victorians were mobilised as part of civil defence preparations all over the state. Over 60,000 people volunteered as auxiliary police officers or performed air raid precautions activities. Preparations included air raid training demonstrations and emergency drills, sandbagging of prominent buildings, and the construction of communal bomb shelters in the city and suburbs, as well as more bespoke backyard trenches. The library holds thousands of photographs that depict what life was like during these tumultuous years. Many of these are part of the Argus newspaper collection of war photographs. The war years brought austerity in the form of food shortages and long working hours, but they also offered excitement and new opportunities, especially for women who were drawn into the paid workforce for the first time, or who volunteered for the war effort. Despite the restrictions, many were to later recall the war years as a time of great social mobility and independence. Though the lights were out, Melbourne was a riot of activity, and its night scene was teeming with life. By April 1942, some 30,000 American service personnel were stationed in Melbourne under the leadership of General Douglas MacArthur. A visitor from Canberra noted, "Melbourne is full of soldiers, most of them American. It is full of men in uniforms, military cars, and lorries painted khaki. Crowds of people swarm in the main streets. Trams are full to overflowing." In the half-light, pubs, cinemas and cafes did a roaring trade. Dance halls were one of the few opportunities for men and women to mingle without formal introduction, and a distinctive Melbourne jazz emerged in the live music scene. But behind the frivolity, a danger was lurking the dimly lit streets. On the 3rd of May 1942, the body of Ivy Violet McLeod was found in the doorway of a shop next to the Bleak House Hotel in Albert Park. Less than a week later, another woman, Pauline Thompson, was found outside a city boarding house. On May 18, a third victim, Gladys Hosking, was found in Royal Park. All three women had been beaten and strangled. The murders, occurring across a 15-day period, caused considerable panic in the community. A media frenzy commenced, with the killer dubbed the Brownout Strangler. After the murder of Gladys Hosking, several women came forward with accounts of being harassed by an American soldier. Police investigations and witness testimony led police to an American serviceman who was stationed at Camp Pearl in Royal Park, 24-year-old Private Eddie Leonsky. Leonsky was known as somewhat of a larrikin who enjoyed socialising, but his acquaintances noted a darker side, a Jekyll and Hyde personality that manifested in heavy drinking and erratic antisocial behaviour. He confessed and was arrested and charged with the murders. As an American citizen, Leonsky was tried before a United States military court-martial. Leonsky's confession indicated that he had a fascination with his victims' voices. He gave no explanation for his crimes, other than to say of one of his victims, "I wanted that voice. I choked her." Leonsky was convicted on July 17 and sentenced to death by hanging at Pentridge Prison. He remains the first and only foreign citizen to have been tried and sentenced to death in Australia under the law of his own country.